There's just a lot of stuff that's done without thinking. A lot of so-called information which doesn't inform. Therefore, you can't call it information. A lot of data, a lot of stuff. Information anxiety is this proliferation of stuff which doesn't attach to you, that has no Velcro on it, that doesn't attach to your interests, that doesn't attach from interest to interest, and that there is a setup in our society that it's an obligation to understand this stuff, to respond to this stuff. One of the interesting examples in corporate America, if you go to some semi-executive's office, you see there's accordion folded paper on their desk of printouts of something, of gadgets that they're selling, right? And I am absolutely convinced that nobody understands it, that nobody looks at it, but they think they should understand it. They think the guy or the woman in the next office does understand it, so they feel this obligation to it and say, good job, and give more money to the information technology group, who only exist because they spend more money developing these these sheets of paper. Let's take a weather map. The weather map very often shows the temperature. I mean, temperature is not uninteresting, but the temperature is the relationship of an instrument to the ambient, amount of, heat or lack of heat. Well, it's always the amount of heat because in a place. But it doesn't tell you how you're going to feel. Weather has to do with how you feel. And we know if it's 30 degrees and 30-mile-an-hour wind, we feel exceedingly different than 30 degrees with no wind. If it's 80 degrees and low humidity, we feel exceedingly different than 80 degrees and 80% humidity. I mean, it's black and white. It's not the same thing. The temperature is not the guiding principle. It's temperature, humidity, and it's the wind factor. There's so many things that are meaningless, so we disregard them. Nothing becomes meaningful, and things just go on. Nobody's going to say, don't do this printout, because that would be a vulnerable thing. So I guess this is a plea for saying, think about the audience or audiences that might want the information, and have it to do with human beings. We're human beings, after all. Ultimately, it has to do with our ability to understand, perceive, learn, make learning connections, and take action. I did the first edition of Information Anxiety in 1989. I have two books, Information Anxiety and Follow the Yellow Brick Road. What I'm in the process of doing, with the help of the wonderful and lovely, supportive, and creative people at Macmillan, what I would like to do is mush them together, take out the dead wood, and there's always dead wood after 10 years, update the text so it's current, and the references are current, and the allusions and the news things are current, and the examples are current, and some of the interviews and a lot of the stuff that I cannibalize from some of the interesting books that have been published are current. And add a few chapters to both that really have to do with the interesting moment we're in today. We're in an information society. We're driven by commercially what we purchase. We're driven in our businesses by understanding our businesses. We're driven by going to school and learning things, and the importance of learning or what they call education in our life. I would hope that the audience that bought the first Information Anxiety, and there's probably 250,000 of them, and the audience that still would like to buy a book which surprised me by becoming a cult book, the people who want it are a lot of people with their feet in the Silicon Valley sand. The principles are fundamental. The principles would help you design a website. The principles would help you talk to your children. The principles would help you explain something to somebody. The principles will help you give instructions, take instructions. Now, what happens if you live your life where you read and want to understand? And that's what information anxiety is about. What if you really want to understand what people say? What if you really want to understand what you read? And that's what I hope the book does. It's not obsessive. It's very reasonable, very empowering to ask good questions and to find out, if this interests me, how do I find out about it? See, that's the fundamental moment. How can you understand what it's like not to understand? It's not an enigma. How do I really understand what it's like not to understand so I can make something understandable? Information Anxiety is a book that was a little bit before its time. Probably it wasn't until 93, 92 or 3 that people realized this tsunami of data that was upon us. The availability, the accessibility of stuff. People in suits were kind of walking through this flotsam and jetsam of stuff, happily going on their way, not realizing they were being drowned, and not finding organizing principles so that they could make valuable decisions, coherent answers, good directions that would be positive for them in their creative life.